Next, we're going to have Sharon Greene. Sharon is the Senior Vice President and Finance Director at HDR. She is the founder of Sharon Greene Associates, a firm specializing in transportation, economics, and financial analysis. Sharon's an expert in transportation planning and infrastructure finance and has provided financial consulting to agencies such as Utah Transit Authority, Valley Metro Rail, and Phoenix. And Sharon sits on APTA's board of directors, where she also chairs the finance subcommittee of the finance subcommittees of the P3 committee and the intercity and high-speed rail committees. Sharon graduated from Harvard University Graduate School of Design and has a master's degree in city and regional planning. Welcome, Sharon.
Here's an overview of what I'm going to cover, and I'm going to have to go fast because there's a lot to say about what is happening in the U.S. right now. First, I'll give you an overview of U.S. public transit P3 programs and policies, looking at existing projects and looking at what's next. And here's an overview of the overview. That's how complicated this is. We're going to look at the main issue, which is essentially what you want to know. Why are there so few P3 projects in the U.S.? That's a real question, and we'll try to answer that one. Look at transit funding and financing under the long-term, quote-unquote, authorization program, now known as the FAST Act in the U.S. And it's the Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act that was passed in 2015. Looking also then at what happens after the FAST Act when it expires in 2020. So what is the main issue in the U.S.? Of course, it's that first one. There's a lack of coherent policy. I hear mention of sustainability and climate change, and I hear mention of a lot of words that used to be used in the President Obama administration. But if you ever submit an application with these words now, don't put NAFTA in it, you know, that kind of thing. So there's a lack of coherence in the policy, and there was before, and now there certainly is. We're looking at an overall debate as to what level of government should be responsible for what. What is the role of the federal government, particularly in transit? And then looking at the fact that all of our agencies are facing increased demands for growing markets. They're looking at O&M costs increasing, state of good repair costs escalating. Looking also as what happens with the revenues. There is no stable ongoing source of revenue. When I heard the minister note that this is a major element in the program, in Canada, yes, this is something that would be great, but we don't have it. And as we'll see soon, in 2020, when the FAST Act expires, there is no ongoing source of revenue to fund the U.S. transportation program. And we have continued reliance on a gas tax that is working its way into the poorhouse and need an alternative to motor fuels charged based on gallonage as the market changes, and it's clear that we need to go to a mileage-based approach, which is not happening. What attracts the private sector to public P3s and public transit? Well, certainly the market is attracted by assured and guaranteed funding, and in the U.S. by tax-exempt financing. This is something I don't believe you have in Canada, and so it's a very unique aspect of the U.S. market. What triggers investors in the U.S. is the ability to access lower-cost debt. It helps all around because the private sector benefits by having tax-exempt debt that it can sell across the market, and it benefits the agencies because their costs are lower when the interest cost is lower. So low-cost financing programs like those listed there, the TIFIA, RIF, and PAV program, which I'll go into in a minute, are very important in the U.S. Also, Federal Transit Administration has a capital investment grant program, used to be called the New Starts program, and this is a key element. All of the major projects get about 50% of their funding through the FTA capital investment grant program. The other element of U.S. funding for projects, whether they're public or P3, is local and state money that can be pledged over time. because P3, if you're looking to attract P3, it's for a lot of reasons, but you're not going to use it as a source of funding for your project. You're going to use it mainly as a source of financing for your project, and you still have to repay those investors. And the US focus has been on this conflict between what is financing and what is funding. So as this shift becomes towards financing, less effort is put into how you're going to fund and generate these funding streams. Because I was interested, Bruce, when you said that the bank is going to fund revenue-generating projects. It's going to be hard. Most transit projects are not revenue-generating, and so the revenue streams for these projects have to come from pledged revenues over time, for the most part, on most projects. The other thing that affects US P3s is that we have a very lengthy project development process, and it's extremely litigious, meaning you can get your project going, you get your environmental document out, you think, and particularly for P3s, timing is of the essence, and you get your project out like the Maryland Purple Line, and then you're sued because, lo and behold, the court has said, okay, yeah, things are happening with the Washington Metro, and the Washington Metro has maintenance problems, and that's going to affect the ridership on the Maryland Purple Line. So I'm going to stop that and say that the environmental document for the Purple Line is invalidated, and you have to go back to the drawing boards. Well, they've already selected a P3 investor, and has a big impact when the project is delayed for over a year and things are hanging in limbo. Being able to drag these projects through the courts has a big impact. The other thing on a lot of the P3 projects is that you have to ring fence them, meaning that you have to be able to isolate things that happen on the project because you're basing it on the availability of that project for use. And if there are things that are shared use in that right-of-way that the P3 partner isn't responsible for, how are you going to account for that? So the ability to ring-fence the projects, you wouldn't do a P3 project that was an extension of a line or a line that was going to be used by a shared corridor where there are other users. You have to isolate a lot of the elements of the project. What are the other issues? This devolution of responsibility for funding to the state and local level. A lot of agencies at the state and local level are passing their own sources of money, meaning they become the stewards. And stewardship meaning that you don't necessarily like to pass on responsibility to others, like a P3 partner. And there is a growing focus on P3 and innovative delivery at the federal level and at the state and local levels. But there isn't a commensurate increase in the monies to back those up. And there are proposals, there's no increase in the capacity in these programs, there's no increase in the ability to get access to the kind of debt that makes these things work. And there are also proposals, as we'll talk in a moment, about eliminating the main federal program, the Capital Investment Grant Program. The FAST Act, Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act, was passed in 2015 under the Obama administration and a Congress that was Republican as opposed to Democrat. Both houses were Republican. It authorizes money over a 2016 to 2020 period. This was the first time in a very long time that the U.S. had a multi-year authorization for public transportation and for transportation period. 5 years of quote-unquote certainty, funding certainty, and then afterwards there's a cliff in 2020 when the program ends. The main way this program was funded, but the Infrastructure Week was sort of overshadowed by other events, but there is going to be an Infrastructure Advisory Council established, and also those are the good news about the program. The bad news is that the administration has proposed eliminating the major funding programs for transit, the Capital Investment Grant Program. Here are the main elements of the President's infrastructure program. A lot of emphasis on project delivery and reducing permitting time from 10 years to 2 years. This is great. There was a press release some of you might have seen here even about DJ Ribbon standing there with a pile of reports that was like the size of that column, and that's the amount of paperwork generated. takes a long time to get through the process. But getting expedited process will save you only some cost, it won't help you deliver. Other elements here about unleashing private capital. And these are the elements, if you looked on the website, you would see that diagram. We're also looking at the advisory council, and the main concept is the one in the middle, about using tax credits from repatriating revenues to the US and repatriating those revenues and leveraging private equity. You will hear about this program being a $1 trillion program, but that isn't in the form of cash. That is in the form of leverage. And there's also new procedures looking for ways to expedite public-private partnerships. This is the main impact, the impact of eliminating the project that funds 50% of the cost of the major New START projects in the US, and this program even funded the main P3 programs, Eagle P3 and the Maryland Purple Line. A lot of places in the US have passed P3 legislation, 35 states, and 15 don't have legislation. And what we see sometimes is there is an emphasis on innovative delivery and quote-unquote P3, not necessarily with risk sharing, on the small and medium-sized projects in these service areas, financial, service delivery, facilities, and then the larger projects are like those listed here, Eagle P3 in Denver, Detroit Q Line, which is a streetcar in Detroit, Maryland Purple Line, which is just gotten its approvals, a number of intercity and high-speed rail projects like Bright Line in Texas, Bright Line in Florida, Texas Central, high-speed rail and Express West. A lot of our projects are blue dots in red states, meaning they're Democratic cities in Republican states, which is an issue, and some of them are even blue dots in blue states. Have a lot of information in this presentation about Eagle P3, 2 lines, the line to the airport. We're looking at the gold line to the airport, and the second line is the University of Colorado line to the airport, and the gold line opened, first line opened in 2016, and if you've gone to Denver, you've seen this, and this is dependent on these federal programs, TIFIA, RIF, and tax-exempt debt, and the FTA New START money. Similarly, the purple line, which is proposed to open now in 2022, the importance of TIFIA, RIF, and private activity bonds, and the New START program, California High-Speed Rail, Express West, Bright Line in Texas Central, Link US project similar to Denver Union Station, looking at automated people movers, getting P3s, blue dots, and what are the main considerations? We need increased funding for transit at the state and local levels as well as the federal level. And then there's the stewardship issue and the need to essentially have a parent process for how you make the decisions. The main conclusion here is that P3 isn't a substitute for funding. We need stable funding. We need an alternative to the gas tax. And at the same time, we need supportive policies to promote P3. But stable and reliable funding is essential for all of that. And if you have any questions, I'm available.